Jeremy Corbyn seemed to be the guy to take us to a brighter future. But at the time, it was also Trump's tenure as president the first time. And I would kind of compare and contrast the two. Is there would be a lot of accusations, pelted either way, right? Whether it's by the US media against Trump or UK media against Jeremy Corbyn. And obviously you had the anti-Semitism against Jeremy Corbyn. Anytime that Trump was accused of something, even if it was true, he'd say fake news, right? Yeah. And he'd get away with it, right? And in my head, obviously maybe because I was young, I didn't know how things worked here in the country. Maybe things in the UK work differently. In my head, I'm thinking, they're lying about you, Jeremy. Why aren't you just labeling it fake news and moving on?
Yeah. I don't think you were naive. I think you were completely right. I mean, I think he should have said that. I mean, I think Corbyn should have used Donald Trump's powers for good instead of evil, basically. Like, I mean, yeah, just like you said, just double down, because actually, unlike Trump, you're right most of the time. So just tell them fake news. Like in terms of the anti-Semitic, and because it was fake news. It actually was fake news. This is the thing, but unfortunately, he didn't do that. Like, so he was accused of either being anti-Semitic or that the people around him were anti-Semitic, and he wasn't doing enough about it, something like that. And so he should have. And unfortunately, his response to that was to just condemn anti-Semitism. Now, what's wrong with condemning anti-Semitism? Okay, fine. The problem is, if you condemn anti-Semitism where there is no anti-Semitism, you're giving the impression there was anti-Semitism in the first place, if you see what I mean. So he was, unfortunately, by doing that, was indirectly contributing to the smears against people who were actually just supporting Palestinians, So it like with Ken Livingstone, for example. So, what he could have done instead was say, well, of course we condemn anti-Semitism, but actually what you're doing here is just attacking me or the people around me because we're supporting Palestinians. And this is just a smear against us, and it is fake news. And he should have done that. And he had that sort of strategy for other topics sometimes. And it was, when he did that, it was very successful. Like, so there was, I mentioned the example in my book of during the election in 2017, if you remember, the Manchester bombing happened during the election campaign. Coincidence? Maybe not, but that's a topic for another time. But the Manchester bombing happened, and a lot of people around Corbyn thought that he should just come out and just condemn the bombing and say, and say, oh, we have to do more about, we have to crack down on this kind of Islamic terror. The typical kind of politicians' response, conservative Labour politicians' response. There was people around him who were saying that he should have that kind of security response to it. And he didn't. He came out and he said, it's terrible, obviously it's a terrible bombing, but also if we have an anti-war policy, then things like this are less likely to happen. And he did do that, and so basically he doubled down. He doubled down on his anti-war take that he's always had, and that was perceived at the time as suicidal by mainstream media, but it worked. It completely worked for him. It was very popular. It was a sensible approach, and it helped him in the polls. So, he should have had the same approach to this so-called anti-Semitism. And he didn't, unfortunately. And I have to say, if he did do that, there's no guarantee it would have worked, because it was a very, very, very powerful fabrication. Like, it was a very strong and it turns out quite successful sabotage campaign. So we can't say for sure that it would have worked, but it was the only thing that could have possibly worked, because there was, and in any way, it was like it was actually the only morally and politically correct thing to do. So he should have done that, and he didn't.
He ended up kind of, in a way, maybe inadvertently purging the party of people who actually supported him.
Yeah.
Maybe he thought these people were dealing in good faith, the people who were accusing of anti-Semitism. Maybe
I think he just didn't want to deal with it. This is the thing, because I think he did find it hurtful, like personally hurtful, to be accused of racism when he's such a strong anti-racist. But and I can understand that, and I can understand like the pressure he was under. But it's quite easy to see in retrospect now, and I mean, I personally found it quite easy to see at the time. But he should have held firm, and he should have purged the party in the other direction. Is what he should have done. Got rid of all these pro-Israel people.
Yeah, because a lot of people came out later and they said they worked against the Labour Party, or against Jeremy Corbyn winning at the time, even though they were doing so well. And arguably, he may have been more popular here than Trump was in the US.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe. Well, who knows? In hindsight,
Yeah.
There's a question, or it's something that I've noticed, looking back, is looking now and then comparing it to back then. The Israeli ambassador that we have now is, I know she's far right. Yeah. She was at some point, I think, minister of.
She's not only a settler; she's a settler leader. Like, she's been a champion of the settlers for many years. Yeah.
And she's a terrible orator, and she doesn't know how to advocate. Well, I mean, it's very difficult to advocate for Israeli genocide. Obviously,
you notice they don't put her on TV all that often.
No.
Yeah.
But before her was Mark Regev.
Yeah.
Who they did put on TV though.
Yeah.
And his tenure kind of coincided with Jeremy's tenure as leader of the Labour Party.
100%.
Do you think there's something there, or do you think it's just a coincidence?
Yeah. No, it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. Whether it was specifically for Corbyn or not, I mean, I do address it in the book, and I get into some of the details of that. It was part of the same strategy of trying to divide the left. Definitely. Specifically on the issue of weaponized anti-Semitism, fake anti-Semitism. It was definitely part of that strategy, because that is long been a strategy in Israeli counterinsurgency, I guess you could say, against the Western solidarity movements with Palestine. Because the thing is with Mark Regev, what a lot of people don't understand, and I mention this in the book, is that we tend, because Mark Regev was for many years the Netanyahu spokesperson, we think of him as being on the Zionist right. But actually, in Zionists' own political language, he's considered part of the Zionist left. Now, we don't understand that, because the Zionist left and the Zionist right are basically identical. Yeah, they're both fascist in different ways. But, his whole political tendency, it perceives itself as left-wing Zionism. And so he's familiar with all that sort of political language of the Labour Party and all that kind of stuff. And so, I think he was sent to London specifically to attack progressive movements and to get them to basically turn against themselves specifically on the issue of anti-Semitism. Yeah, so, he was exactly in the right place at the right time in order to combat Corbynism, and it has to be said, he did a good job of it.
Yeah, unfortunately, they did succeed, but
yeah.
And now we have this soulless, as Matt Kennard described him, fella in charge, Keir Starmer, who doesn't have a single. Doesn't he hold a single belief of his own? I don't know. I feel like he doesn't.
Yeah, I don't. I agree with that. Yeah, he's. I think he's a sort of willing servant of whatever powers are that be, basically. Yeah.
That brings me on to another question about Corbyn, which is he definitely posed some sort of threat to the establishment and the empire. And so my question is, if it wasn't anti-Semitism, would they have found something else?
That's a good question. Yes and no. I mean, they found, as it went, they did find a lot of things. Like they attacked him on in a lot of different ways. They had, if you remember, there was that front page of the Sun during one of the elections. I think it must have been the 2017 election, and it was just a stupid graphic of a photo of Corbyn, and they just put him in a bin, and the headline was something like bin Corbyn or something stupid like that.
Classic Sun.
Yeah, exactly. And it was it was they listed, I detail it in my book, but it was something like they listed the things that they were accusing him of: being a left-wing extremist, IOA sympathizer, terrorist fan, and all this kind of stuff. But they didn't at that stage say anti-Semite, because people don't care. Because even then, in terms of the general population, just knew that they're only saying that about it. That's not true. It's obviously not true. He's obviously not an anti-Semite, and they're only saying that because he's involved in Palestine solidarity work. So they did have all these different things that they attacked him on, but nothing really stuck. Nothing really worked so well as the anti-Semitism fabrication. And really that only worked so well because the British left was so, in terms of the influential people, names and whatnot on the British left was so useless on the question, because there was elements of it who were, even people like John Landsman, who were at a minimum sympathetic to Zionism. I mean, at the beginning of the genocide, John Landsman just came fully out in favour, really, of the genocide. So the mask was fully off there. But for whatever reasons, whatever various historical reasons, this was the only thing that really, really worked, and it worked because of there was a large influential infiltration of Zionism within the British political left, and certainly in terms of people who were influential around Corbyn, that played a big part in his defeat.
That actually brings us to the question, kind of, what is the Labour Party? Is it actually left-wing, or is it simply, as I think I read this somewhere, where they attempt, at least when they were founded, attempt to split the spoils of British Empire more evenly amongst the citizens of the United Kingdom, as opposed to actually creating some sort of equity and equality among subjects of the empire itself.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, what you've just said. And it's actually a very old critique of the British Labour Party specifically. Lenin himself called it Labour aristocracy, that the British working class, or elements of the British working class, actually benefited from British Empire, because we were able to have a welfare state and an NHS. I mean, this is later than Lenin, obviously, but and yet still benefiting from proceeds of empire in various different ways. Now, of course, it's American empire. So yeah, I mean, I think by now there's several layers of that in terms of the Labour Party that we have now. Like, the Labour Party doesn't even have those those benefits, even for the white or British working class. It doesn't even have those. It's completely neoliberal since 1979, when Thatcher came in. Thatcherism changed it all. Thatcher, I mentioned this in the book, but Thatcher herself said her main achievement was to change the Labour Party. And the Labour Party under Tony Blair and his successors became very, very pro-free markets, anti-welfare state, anti-nationalisation. They privatised everything they could get their hands on. They didn't manage to privatise the NHS, but now the Labour government and previous governments are sort of doing it by the back door in increments, privatising off parts of it. And so, they have, and they have the war, they have the pro-war platform, But they don't even have the beneficial side of that for the Labour aristocracy doesn't really exist because what aristocracy is there? Not what is the British working class getting?
I mean, the empire's gone, I guess. So.
Yeah, well, there is that. Yeah.
This indicates like what seems to be a major failure of party politics, which is instead of actually standing for some sort of set of beliefs and addressing the issues within society through the lens of your set of beliefs, all you're doing is attempting to get elected for the next term and just shifting to whatever's going to get you elected, whatever's popular.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's the Starmer's Labour apparatchiks were always talking about power, but I mean, what's the point of getting into power if your policies that you're enacting with that power are essentially, for the most part, the same as the Conservative Party? Like, what benefit is there? Another thing the Blairites were very much in favour of was Israel. You know, Tony Blair was very financially actually backed by pro-Israel lobby, as is Keir Starmer, and I think that's why Corbyn was seen as such a threat to this establishment, because he wasn't taking the pro-Israel money, and he did have very minimal. You know, he didn't see Palestinians as animals. You know, he saw Palestinians as human. You know, so yeah, he was seen as a threat, and consequently, he had to be removed, and he was.
Was he ever labelled anti-Afrikaner when he was campaigning against apartheid?
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know. He may have been, but you raise a good point, because there's a lot of similarities between Israel and apartheid South Africa, but it's a similarity and it's a difference, right? Because there actually was a pro apartheid lobby in the West that did exist, and it was quite successful for a period, but it wasn't as the concept of anti-Afrikaner racism. I don't think it really existed, as far as I know, and if it did, it certainly wasn't successful to the extent that the anti-Semitism fabrication has been.